By the early 1930s, Saskatchewan was deep in the Great Depression. Drought, economic collapse, and widespread unemployment reshaped life across the prairie. Towns struggled, farms failed, and crime increased across rural districts already thinly policed. RCMP detachments covered vast areas with few officers. At night, patrols were often conducted alone across poor roads with limited communication and long response times. In Foam Lake, that responsibility fell to Corporal Leonard Ralls. Ralls was an experienced officer assigned to a rural district facing a rising number of break-ins, thefts, and armed robberies. Like many Mounties of the era, he worked with little backup and relied on judgment shaped by long experience on the prairie. On the night of July 4, 1932, RCMP Constable Michael Nowakowski was on General Highway Patrol along Highway number 14 between Springside and Theodore. He had been instructed to stop all vehicles after midnight due to the number of robberies being committed in the district. At approximately 1:40 a.m. on July 5th, Nowakowski attempted to stop a car matching the description of a vehicle suspected in recent crimes. The driver did not stop. Instead, the car accelerated toward Nowakowski, forcing him to jump clear to avoid being struck. Nowakowski gave chase, but the occupants repeatedly forced him into loose gravel, preventing him from overtaking them. The pursuit continued for nearly an hour across isolated prairie roads. During the chase, the occupants of the fleeing car fired repeatedly at Nowakowski. He returned fire several times, but without effect. Alone, with limited visibility and no immediate assistance, Nowakowski eventually broke off the pursuit. He stopped in the village of Shiho and telephoned ahead to warn other detachments. Corporal Ralls received the call in the early hours of the morning. After receiving Nowakowski's message, Ralls proceeded to the west limits of Foam Lake and positioned his car across the bridge at Milligan Creek to prevent passage. The bridge was narrow, a concrete bowstring arch structure, and Ralls placed his car in such a way that any approaching vehicle would be forced to stop. He waited. After the suspect vehicle stopped on the narrow bridge, one of the occupants slipped out into the darkness. As Ralls approached the car, he was suddenly shot at from two directions. Gravely wounded, Ralls managed to return fire and retreat toward the cover of his own vehicle. The attackers then disabled the police car by tearing out its ignition wires before fleeing the scene. Despite his injuries, Ralls called out for help. A nearby neighbor, awakened by the gunfire, came to his aid and drove him to the local doctor's office. Ralls died shortly after arrival from internal hemorrhaging caused by the gunshot wounds, but not before reporting that his assailants had fled to the east. At 2:25 a.m., word reached Yorkton that Corporal Ralls had been shot. Every available RCMP officer was dispatched to the district. Inspector Moorhead traveled from Yorkton to Foam Lake to personally take charge of the search. Later that morning, Constable Nowakowski and Constable Walter Hutchinson located the abandoned, stolen Plymouth sedan hidden in thick bush near the village of Lintlaw, with stolen property still inside. Investigators found 3 bullet holes in the engine cover and 1 in the right-hand door. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in Saskatchewan history. More than 300 civilians joined over 24 police officers in a coordinated search across the Nut Mountain district. Roads were patrolled throughout the night. Rain and darkness hampered progress. Citizens armed themselves with rifles and revolvers, while police stood ready with tear gas and machine guns if resistance was encountered. An aircraft chartered from the Regina Flying Club was brought in to assist. From the air, officers tracked movement, dropped instructions to ground parties, and harassed the fugitives. After their capture, the suspects admitted that the plane repeatedly forced them to hide, slowing their escape. On July 7th, police located 3 horses tied near a farm northeast of Kelvington. One suspect, 17-year-old Mike Kurelak, was arrested while attempting to untie them. 2 others fled into the bush, exchanging gunfire with pursuing officers before escaping. Police learned from the arrested suspect that the remaining fugitives were Mike's older brother William Kurelak and Bill Miller. Both had criminal records. In the early hours of July 8th, information reached police that a stranger had sought food and shelter at a nearby farm. The owner gave the stranger a bed and then quietly went to a neighboring farm and called the police. Officers entered the house and arrested the man while he slept, a loaded .38 caliber revolver lying beside him. He was identified as William Kurelak. Miller, the last fugitive at large, was spotted several times throughout the day, but each time he fled in exchanges of gunfire. Late in the afternoon, he was finally surrounded in a bluff near Warner Lake, about 14 kilometers north-northeast of Kelvington. Police and Miller exchanged considerable gunfire. After a lull, officers cautiously entered the bush and found Miller lying dead. He had 2 serious wounds from police bullets, but had taken his own life with his revolver rather than submit to capture. Mike Kurelak and William Kurelak later made confessions, admitting they had been in the car stopped by Corporal Ralls. Both claimed that Bill Miller had fired the fatal shots. The Kurelak brothers were tried in Yorkton later that year. William Kurelak was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Mike Kurelak was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Corporal Leonard Victor Ralls was buried in Prince Albert. He left behind a widow and 4 children, and a town and detachment that would never see him return. Today, Corporal Ralls is among the 251 who are listed on the RCMP Honor Roll, and whose names are read aloud each year at the RCMP National Memorial Service Parade at Depot Division. He is remembered also at Corporal Ralls Park in Foam Lake, the community where his final duty was carried out. In the early hours of July 5, 1932, duty placed one officer alone on a narrow bridge. Corporal Leonard Victor Ralls answered that duty, knowing the risks and accepting them without hesitation, with no expectation of recognition and no certainty of return. He stood where many RCMP officers of that era stood, carrying responsibility alone and without backup. What followed became part of Saskatchewan's history, written at a cost that would be felt long after.